fellow wrestling fans, this is Tom Colohue, a slightly different setup, ready for a Monday Night Raw review from the 18th of May 2020. Please take a moment to click the like button before we get started, and let's jump straight in. We open with another tribute to Becky Lynch, the same as the one they showed on Friday Night SmackDown, really describing the whole situation, Becky Lynch's announcement, Asuka now the Raw Women's Champion after winning Money in the Bank and taking the briefcase with it. It's an emotional video. I think it'll slightly lessen the impact the more they show it, but I think it's definitely worth showing again given that it gives us a lot of backstory for what's going to happen later. I did report on Thursday that Asuka was not aware that Becky Lynch was pregnant. She wasn't aware that that was the announcement coming. These are the times when I really think a lot of wrestling journalists need to calm down quite a bit, and especially a lot of fans. It was Becky Lynch's announcement to make, and a lot of people were so desperately seeking out information that they were able to say or were able to guess or were speculating on what the announcement was going to be. It was Becky Lynch's announcement. She was thankfully able to still surprise a few people, including Asuka, who gave a very genuine reaction when she found out not that she was going to be champion, but that Becky Lynch was going to be a parent. Raw was particularly top heavy this week, but they did manage to spread it out quite nicely. Drew McIntyre was saved for the main event, as well as probably the strongest draw on Monday Night Raw, King Corbin. Yep. Seth Rollins appeared twice, as well as Buddy Murphy, who is starting to become a little bit of a draw on his own right, I've got to say. But they did start with probably the strongest draws they have on the show, those being Edge and Randy Orton. We did see appearances later on from Charlotte. Bobby Lashley has been interwoven with a few stories, and Kevin Owens returned in this show. So we are seeing the ranks start to spread out and grow once again. Conspicuous by his absence, of course, is AJ Styles, who has only been on 2 installments of Monday Night Raw since WrestleMania. Judging by their recording schedule, he is going to be on SmackDown more often than he has been on Raw, if he makes it all the way to the final. He, of course, is in the tournament as per the Brand Invitational, which means he only has 4 appearances per year, one of many reasons I don't see him winning the championship. I did report a couple of months ago that there wasn't that much for him on Monday Night Raw. The Undertaker match seemingly came out of nowhere early on this year, and The Undertaker wasn't originally planned for a WrestleMania match, but then became available, and the match was scheduled. Until then, they weren't really sure what to do with AJ Styles, and now without the club either, it seems like Raw still isn't sure what to do with AJ. A rematch may be coming between The Undertaker and AJ Styles, but I worry they won't be able to live up to just how good the Boneyard match was, even just by virtue of a Boneyard match. Right now, SmackDown are utilising AJ Styles more effectively. With Edge and Orton opening the show, we did have a doubling down on the greatest wrestling match ever shtick that they're doing. This was repeated several times during the night. They're really pushing that one. And I've got to say, this feud has been great. The promos they're cutting are fantastic. The fact that neither man is getting in the ring with anyone is, I think, really adding to the moment when they finally do start wrestling. But the branding has not been good at all. The first match was built on Edge saying that he had grit. This, of course, is his new grit t-shirt. Grit, I don't feel is a word that really has the impact they're going for. And now going for the greatest wrestling match ever, maybe not the best choice for me. I think you're setting them up for disappointment, because there have been some fantastic wrestling matches over the years, and they would have to deliver way more than I think they are capable of with no crowd. When you think back to like The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, the crowd made that match. It wasn't particularly a good match, but they built around the crowd and the reactions they did, so it wasn't supposed to be a good match. This, with no crowd, is going to be very different. What I will say is that the promos from both Randy Orton and Edge have been fantastic. Edge in an empty arena has delivered more than I've seen anyone deliver. He is one who has really used the format fantastically. And I've got to say, when the crowds come back, people are still going to really react for Edge, but he will have to go slightly different when it comes to his delivery. A lot of people said to me that this was probably because of his theatre training. I wholeheartedly agree. Well done, Edge. Another man who's using the empty arenas very well is Seth Rollins. He came out next to the sound of No Burn It Downs, and with his hair salted again. Didn't like it. I wanted the crazy hair. I wanted insane Seth. I think now that they've defined it a little bit, the story was supposed to be that Seth had gone a little bit mad because he lost to Drew McIntyre. But when it comes to what actually happened, it looked very much like, because like an hour earlier, the announcement had been that Becky Lynch was pregnant, and it looked like he was reacting to that, which is just such a happy coincidence. I really enjoyed the fan reaction to that. Now that they've defined it, we can see more clearly where he's going, but it was such a lovely little thing that sort of accidentally happened that I really enjoy. Seth would cut a promo on Rey Mysterio, essentially saying, "You're welcome." So that's not another apology then. He did try to apologise last week, and I was certainly one of several people who thought that this might be more leaning towards face. He did, after all, shake Drew's hand right after losing the match. These were face traits. They do seem to have pushed now towards heel again, which is fine by me. I'm very happy with this version of Seth Rollins. There will be more on that later. Humberto Carrillo is the one who comes down to represent Rey Mysterio's interests here. He loses clean to Buddy Murphy in fairly short order. It's not a long match. He's able to show some of what he can do, but long term it's a difficult one. Carrillo has flattered to deceive a little bit when it comes to the main roster. He can deliver in the ring. His promos unfortunately haven't connected. It's much more difficult now to connect, but thankfully there is a benefit in that people aren't shouting "what" every time he says anything. I hate it when people do that. Look at Asuka now that nobody's shouting "what." Liv Morgan has a backstage promo with a different backdrop. Literally, she could be anywhere. She could very easily be filming this in her own home. Fair enough, interesting way to do it. Where she talks about her family and her history and her time with Charlotte Flair. Liv is a very long-term story. She's been talking about reinventing herself since not long after the Riot Squad first broke up, which is a couple of years ago now. So it's been a long-term thing. I do feel she's starting to find her footing, but right now there isn't much that she can do other than losing to people like Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. She needs opponents, she needs heels below that tier. There really aren't many. Raw could do with some heels at the lower section, as it were. A temporary call-up or call sideways for someone like Dakota Kai could be very beneficial indeed. The Street Profits and the Viking Raiders connected for an axe-throwing contest. I'll talk about this all now instead of breaking it out over the night, which is how they did it, and I essentially forgot in the third hour that we'd actually had this segment in the first hour, which is not a good sign. But I think they actually did pretty well with this. I've not been the biggest fan of what's been happening with the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders. I thought the carpool karaoke was not good at all. The basketball, it wasn't really for me. This, however, I actually did quite enjoy because there was such a sense of camaraderie about it. I do get the feeling that we're not so much building to a match as building to a massive bro hug in the middle of the ring. And with so few other tag teams in the Raw tag division, Ricochet, Cedric Alexander, Vink and Form were not featured this week, it's going to take a while to drag this out because there's no one else left really, until at least we maybe get the AOP back. But even when we had them, they weren't really fighting in the tag divisions. They were the tag team in a faction which didn't get the tag team titles. So it's hard to say, but I actually did quite enjoy this. I thought it was entertaining enough. The fact that they were all cheering each other on and supporting each other was quite good, and good for these times particularly. So I'm not the biggest proponent of a lot of what they're doing. This hit the mark for me. Hopefully they'll continue to do that. Kairi Sane introduced new Raw Women's Champion Asuka for a big celebration, masses of balloons everywhere, and a recorder solo, which was... It's hard to describe. I always think about this when you're talking about the New Day. How do you describe the New Day to a non-wrestling fan? How do you describe Asuka and Kairi Sane to a non-wrestling fan? Even more so, how do you describe them in the way that really does explain how awesome they are? Because this was thoroughly entertaining. Nia Jax came down to spoil the fun, got beat down a little bit for her troubles, and I've got to say we are definitely firmly in face Asuka territory now, because instead of it being Asuka and Kairi Sane beating down Nia Jax, who is of course a heel for life now after what happened with Becky Lynch, it was just Asuka. If you missed my Facebook live stream on the Sports Keeda channel a couple of hours before Raw, I think it'll be 7 hours before Raw. Nope. 8 hours before Raw. Sorry, time zones. 8 hours before Raw, I did mention in that Nia Jax was next in line to face off of Asuka, and then Shayna Baszler was being built towards it. Baszler later in the night would have a far too short submission match with Natalya, that I felt these two people, these two women, can go much longer and put on a match even just as good as this, because it was a very good match. But it did not last long. Shayna Baszler won in short order. Fair enough, she is being built towards the championship. This moment will come. It's good to see Natalya putting her over in this way, but I do feel I'd like to see more from those two. Charlotte Flair also had a match where she defeated Ruby Riott, and probably made Ruby Riott look a lot better than the match with Liv Morgan did. Bobby Lashley took on R-Truth. Again, I like what's happening with MVP and Lashley. I think the storyline they've got is really helping rebuild Lashley towards championship opportunities and hopefully Brock Lesnar. But I do feel, unfortunately, that what R-Truth is doing here isn't really adding to it, because it's making it more of a joke, and we need to be taking Bobby Lashley more seriously. I feel now that he looks to be moving away from R-Truth, we're going to take him that bit more seriously, but this match, for me, didn't do all that much for him. There was teasing that maybe him and MVP might not be grouping up, but I think we can see where this is going. I'm happy to see this take a little time. I did engage a little bit with MVP. My opinion of the match at Money in the Bank was that it came out of nowhere. And MVP was completely right in what he said to me. I need to have more faith and let the story play out. It's playing out very well, I've got to say. Our final women's match was for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross took on the returning Iconics, who beat them clean last week. This time, the titles are retained and Bliss and Cross win via DQ, because Peyton Royce breaks a lot of tag team rules. I am starting to think this may be Vince McMahon poking fun at the reports recently about him having new and unsubscribed tag team rules that people weren't aware of. But if you ask certain tag teams, for example the Revival when they were in the company, these aren't new rules and these aren't hidden rules. These are the tag team rules. So Peyton Royce interfered several times. You are only supposed to be able to interfere once if you are not the legal person to, for example, break up a pinfall. This is something that I learned from the Revival, now FTR of course. And she did not keep to that. Peyton Royce interfered several times, threw Alexa Bliss into the pole, which unfortunately Bliss wasn't able to sell particularly well. It's hard to work into the pole. Triple H avoided it for this exact reason. He couldn't sell it particularly well. Bigger guys like Braun Strowman and of course Goldberg sell being thrown into a pole very well. Kevin Owens makes his return, hosting the Kevin Owens Show. Natalya, after losing her previous match, wrecked some of the scenery, but he introduces Team Vega, who come out, share a ring with Owens. Owens leaves the ring to respect them. Fair enough. And I've got to say, Vega and Owens is going to be an interesting little sparring match coming soon. I always enjoyed Owens and Lana and everything that they did when they were arguing in those setups there. This does lead to a match when Owens introduces the returning Apollo Crews. Crews, of course, is going to have a US title match next week, long overdue. He's due that rematch. But this week, of course, they had a tag team match. Crews and Owens against Andrade and Garza. Austin Theory left on the outside, interferes in the match, accidentally hits his own guy, and after the win for Crews and Owens, we get a beatdown of Austin Theory and he gets left on the outside. They're starting to make a bit of a habit of that, learning from the best. By which I mean the Nexus, of course. The penultimate match of the night was Aleister Black against Buddy Murphy. Black showing a renewed intensity in his attempt to defend Rey Mysterio. Shame he didn't come out earlier in the night. But he did come in with real fury here. And these are two people, Murphy and Aleister Black, that just do not have bad matches. And I mean that solo, and I definitely mean that together. It was a short match. It clearly wasn't meant to be the story in the ring, the story without the ring, where Seth Rollins recruited Austin Theory. Can I just say, I love Team Vega, but what an upgrade right there. This is a great move for Austin Theory. I'm sure a lot of people are aware that there were rumours, speculation in the week that Austin Theory would be splitting from the team and going back to NXT. Those rumours clearly were not true. I did talk about this in the live stream on Sportskeeda channel, and I did say that I expected this to play out a little bit longer at least. We now have what's going to be very interesting if we have a clash between Team Rollins and Team Vega, even though they are both heels. I do remember when they built up the Shield and the Wyatt family independently, for about a year, both as heels, and then they just randomly converged. And it was electric. That could be very exciting. Finally, we have our main event, and of course Monday Night Raw is main evented by their biggest star, Baron Corbin, who comes down to the ring to challenge the WWE Champion Drew McIntyre, but not for the title, although they didn't technically make that clear. Bobby Lashley and MVP make themselves known early on, which definitely puts Bobby Lashley in line for this championship. A quick shout out to Drew McIntyre, who is of course a very active and fighting champion. Over the course of 7 weeks since WrestleMania, he has fought and defeated Brock Lesnar, The Big Show, Angel Garza, Andrade, Murphy, Seth Rollins, and Baron Corbin. 7 people in 7 weeks. Very definition of a fighting champion, and I believe he's beaten Andrade twice. McIntyre picks up the win in very convincing fashion. Not too much of a surprise to anyone, McIntyre is getting a very strong push at the moment. Even though unfortunately the ratings aren't on his side, I do feel he's had a great time of it so far, and I think they're definitely building him right. I do worry, of course, if they keep building him in this way, fans are going to start to turn. It's a shame, but that's the way that fans work, unfortunately. Fingers crossed they don't, or by SummerSlam, maybe we see the title come off McIntyre and he goes back to the chase. I am still hoping we maybe get McIntyre Undertaker at SummerSlam. They don't have that many opponents for him after all. I polled Twitter to see what they thought of tonight's Raw, and it was a good from them. I agree this was a good show. I'd give it a B+. There weren't many things that are going to have great long-lasting effects, but when you look at what's happened with Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley coming into the fray, it definitely adds a lot. There are a few things that I feel they could have built up a bit more. Nia Jax, after dominance constantly, got destroyed by Asuka twice, even though she got some nice heat back when she attacked Kairi Sane. I feel the finish to the women's tag team match wasn't particularly strong. But overall, when you look at what they did, this may have been the greatest Raw ever. Thanks for watching.